Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidtless Live. I'm Kurt Schmidt, your host, president, and partner at Foundry. I'm excited today because I've got a good friend of mine, Tim, joining me. We're going to talk things about being a virtual leader. Now, this year's been interesting for all of us leaders. We've had to start leading virtually. It's not as easy as you might have hoped it would have been. I mean, maybe many of you have tons of experience working with remote teams and you've got it down, okay? I'm not one of those people. I'm still learning. I'm still growing as a leader. And so Tim's here to join me and talk about all things leadership when it comes to being a virtual person. So I'm going to introduce Tim here. Tim, how are you today? Thank you for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Kurt.
Cool. Thank you, Tim. So Tim, you do a thing called BehaviorAlchemy. BehaviorAlchemy. Let me know if I get that wrong. And you also do the Behavioral Grooves podcast. What kind of work do you do and who do you do it for?
So my work is the application of behavioral science in a very horizontal way, but I focus mainly on incentives, goal setting, and recognition, employee development sorts of projects. And most of my clients, my clients are all over the place, from nonprofits to startups to app development to Fortune 100 companies. So really all over the board, literally all over the world.
It sounds like rewarding work.
It's fantastic. It's my favorite thing to do. It really is. And that's BehaviorAlchemy. Behavioral Grooves is a podcast that was started about the same time that Schmidtless was started, in the fall of 2017. And we, along with my partner Kurt Nelson, we've got almost 190 episodes out there of conversations with researchers, publishers, authors, applications specialists, basically all about the application of behavioral science.
Yeah, it's a fantastic podcast. I definitely suggest anybody who's watching, if you haven't seen it or checked it out, make sure you do. So Tim, I want to jump right in. This year's been a challenging year for all of us in leadership positions, whether you're a manager or just, you're a team lead, you're a CEO. It's been a difficult year moving to this more virtual aspect. Now, myself, personally, I'm a very body language oriented person, right? Like when I'm meeting with folks and I'm chatting with employees and people, I'm watching if their arms are crossed or, if they've got their hand on their face and all these things. It's much more difficult judging how people are accepting your message or things that you're putting out there as a leader these days. And one of the things I think has been the most challenging for me, like I said, is the body language piece, is being able to see, are people engaged with what I'm saying? And how am I emoting back to them? Right. I'm much more conscious of my body language virtually as well. In your expertise, Tim, how can we kind of bridge that gap in body language when we are in a virtual sort of environment? What have you seen work? What have you seen not work?
That's a really good question, Kurt. We should start by saying that emotions are really important.
Yeah.
Emotions drive maybe north of 75% of all of our behaviors. So if we're not thinking as leaders about the emotions of the people that we're working with, we're totally missing the boat. This is a really, really foundational aspect of who we are and what's happening right now. So we as leaders need to be thinking and be aware of those emotions. There's some research done by Melanie Brooks, who is at Columbia University in New York. She has actually been doing some research on the effectiveness of Zoom meetings. And one of the things that she's been focusing on, which I think is really interesting, is how we will focus on just the person when we're talking to them in a Zoom meeting. When there's a bunch of people, it gets more difficult if we've got more than 5 or 6 people on a Zoom meeting,
Yeah.
right? It gets more challenging to really stay focused on everybody. And then we also can kind of get into that nitpicking kind of thing of, I saw them kind of, they were kind of scratching their head, like,
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly
what was that
what I'm
about?
getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, and whereas if we were all sitting around a conference table in a single conference room, we might not think twice about that because the context is different, and because the context is now very very focused. It's really up to the leaders to take time to actually check in with individuals, not just in teams, but to take time to talk to direct reports and find out how they're doing. What are the stressors in their lives? We're COVID is on the rise dramatically, pretty much everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So, are they stressed on Monday morning because one of their relatives or loved ones was just diagnosed? Just got a positive back on the coronavirus.
Right.
What's going on in their world? But that's really better off in a one-on-one. It's good to pay attention to how they're responding in the team meeting, but ultimately you've got to reach out and Michael Bowden, the head of sales for Syngenta, said it so well. He said, "I start every conversation with, as opposed to saying, I used to say, how are your numbers? Now I'm saying, how are you doing,
Hmm.
and what's going on?" And that
Yeah.
that's an important place to start,
Yeah.
right there.
Well, I think you bring up a topic that I've found really interesting this year is the more amount of personal sharing going on in the workplace, virtual workplace, than ever before. And I think part of it for me has been, you're inviting people into your home every day with meetings and things, and so I feel like it becomes a little bit more natural to share those personal feelings and things. And so, as a leader, if you're not quite equipped with the emotional intelligence to handle um, that sort of new channel coming through, right? Because, a lot of times there was a big separation between church and state. We didn't have those conversations and
That's right.
things, or at least to the level maybe that I've seen them happen this year, right? Do you feel like there's been a change there and a shift in the amount of information we're sharing about ourselves personally? Is it the same, or is it just because of this new sort of world that I'm experiencing that?
It is on the rise, and
Okay.
I think that it's a good thing. However, there's two. If we were to just break it down really in very gross terms, there are workplaces where the employees feel psychologically safe, and there are workplaces where they don't feel psychologically safe. And this ability to share a little bit more about what's going on, and it might just start with your dog running up and
Right. Exactly.
jumping
Right.
on you during a Zoom call. That a year ago, oh man, so we would have totally freaked us out. Now it's just like everybody on the Zoom call is like, "Oh, is that your puppy? What?
Right.
Tell us about that." Right. So there's sort of a good thing about that, but psychological safety is a foundational aspect of what we need to be thinking about today as leaders in building a place where people can actually feel comfortable about disagreeing with the group, with bringing up things that might not be very popular, with being able to share their own feelings in a healthy and respectful way, and then not get shot down. So psychological safety is absolutely foundational. And you mentioned EQ. If leaders aren't investing in their own emotional intelligence training right now,
Mm,
they're missing a boat. This is a tremendous opportunity to invest more in that area.
yeah. Well, do you find that, again, going back to, and I've said this on this show a lot of times, I think this year I've had to just be much more intentional than ever before when it comes to, and like you mentioned, doing one on ones, pulling people aside, saying, hey, can you stay after the meeting? These types of things where, before, I might just catch them in the elevator on the way out that
Right.
day and chat with them. But now I just have to be much more surgical in my conversations with folks and pushing past my own discomfort, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
also feeling vulnerable as a leader. I'm feeling, am I doing the right thing? Am I getting the messaging across in the way it needs to be? Am I establishing? Are people understanding the vision, right? And so, for me, it has been a lot of that. What you've been talking about is really holding up the mirror a lot more than I probably ever have before to check myself to make sure, am I being intentional? Am I being perceived correctly? Asking people, after the fact, did you understand the messaging? Did you read it back to me? Tell me what you heard when we talked about this in the all staff meeting, and that's
Yeah.
been really important.
Intentionality is the watchword.
Okay.
That is the shibboleth that we need to be working from right now, because that is the way that we're going to be most successful. And it also lays a foundation for the ability to create a team charter. When we think about why we engage in things, one of the greatest psychological factors is if we have some sense of ownership. And so you can engage your team in creating a team charter to actually create sort of a North Star to say, this is how we want to manage things over the next month or so. This is the kind of communication that we think that we need. These are the not just these are the projects, but these are the ways that we want to deal with projects and people, just in a short term. Just and we need to be adaptive as well.
Yeah.
If intentionality is number one, adaptive is number two. And realize that as things change, we need to be willing to adapt our processes internally. And that's absolutely a critical part of it as well.
Right. Yeah. You've got to be open to change. That's for sure.
You have to
That's what I
be.
found.
Well, the world is changing around us,
Mhm.
so yeah, I have to
Right.
be.
Right. Yeah. You either go with the flow or you get washed over the top of you. Um,
Pretty much, yeah.
so with that, Tim, what has been some of the things that you've given advice to leaders this year? Some of the things that you've seen really work, and some of the things that maybe you told people to double down on, things that they were doing before, or areas if you were talking with somebody who was feeling like they were struggling a bit in that virtual leadership, what are some of the things that you're advising them this year on to focus on?
There are 4 points that we keep coming back to just in the last 6-8 months that seem to have the greatest gravity. And of course, how any of these 4 impact you or your organization needs to be tailored suitably, right? But the four things are, I mentioned psychological safety. That needs to be number one. You need to be able to create a foundation around people being comfortable expressing themselves and not being attacked in team meetings. The second is this idea of creating a team charter. When we come together and build a plan to get to our North Star, which is not a contract, but really more of a general direction that we want to go in for a short period of time, then we have greater buy-in, and we have more compliance then with achieving our goals. So that's the second thing. The third thing is really reorienting the processes, adapting the processes for more human-centered activities, rethinking recognition, rethinking the way that we talk to each other, and leverage tools that are going to continue to help us refocus our processes more about the human needs that we have right now. And then the last one, Kurt, would be creating a clear path forward, even if that clear path is just for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Some companies I've seen do a really good job of saying, okay, we're not, the pandemic started and they're like, well, you're working from home, but we have no idea. They could have said, you're working from home until the end of the month or until the end of next month.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to reevaluate or at some point in time. Just this open-endedness is very, very difficult to deal with. And the more the companies can just be specific to say, we're going to draw a line in the sand and things can change, but let's at least agree on sort of a common set of expectations for at least for the short term.
Yeah, because I love what you said, because vision is such an important thing, and I think it's one of the most difficult things that leaders struggle with. I mean, I could tell you, every piss poor leader I've worked under in my career lacked vision. That was the underlying reason of why they weren't a good manager or a good boss, is because when you were asking them, like, what does success look like, and they're like, well, bigger numbers, that's what it looks like. More money, that's what it looks like to me. There's my vision. More revenue.
That's not a
So
vision.
yeah, and so to your point, I think that's something that I've worked really hard on this year myself personally, is just to your point, is establishing those short-term kind of sprints where it's like, we want to improve our onboarding process. Let's work on that for the next 2 months and reevaluate, because now we're onboarding people virtually. And so we have to get better at this, because we were not good at onboarding people virtually. We had to get better at it. because, at Foundry this year, I mean, we've hired 10, 11 people this year as it is. So
Cool.
onboarding, let's just say we had lots of opportunity to improve that onboarding. Um, but with that, one of the biggest things was myself and my partners establishing the vision of what a good onboarding experience should feel like, not what it should look like, not what the check boxes and things. That's for the managers and the other people to do. But we had to really sit down and say, what is the vision for what a good onboarding experience looks like? What is the vision for a good virtual project kickoff look like? What
Yeah.
do people feel like? How do they come out of it? Those are the things that we really needed to focus on as leaders, is establishing that sort of baseline and then allowing the people to then execute on those things. You can't just walk in and say, well, onboarding sucks, so fix it. I'm going to go get a coffee. you know?
Right.
Right.
Right. Well,
But
you mentioned outcomes, which
yeah.
are always important to look at. However, the in-process aspects are important to look at as well. It's really important for leaders to be asking, what does the onboarding experience feel like when you're in the middle of it? How do
Mhm.
we want people to feel at this point and at this point and at this point?
Right.
And to actually, break things down into more process oriented. Sales organizations have really struggled recently because in some organizations, they simply can't achieve the outcome numbers, the results numbers that they
Sure.
used to go for. So then we have to pull back and focus on, well, how are people doing on meetings, and how are they doing on presentations and proposals and demos and all
Yeah.
the sort of in process measures that are always important. We always need to be doing those things, but in non-COVID times, it's too easy to sort of lose track of that stuff and just focus almost entirely on the results, when really now is the time to focus on the process, especially, and I mentioned adaptivity. We've got to be adaptive. We've got
Yeah.
to be willing to continue to adjust.
Yeah, and the other part that I found this year is really embracing richer media in the communication, right? So, a great
Mhm.
leader of mine once said, 7 times, 7 different ways, right? So, you want to get your message across, say it 7 times, but say it in 7 different sort of mediums, and using things like video and audio and presentations and collaboration tools like Miro board and all these other things have
Yeah.
been so helpful in embracing those tools. I think, especially, some leaders, they might be a little intimidated by some of these, tools. And I think that's the other part that I would definitely suggest to folks is embracing those tools. I get such great short form videos sent to me more so nowadays, and it's just great. It's just, instead of shooting me a text message or an email or a Slack, make a quick little video with your selfie camera and just send
Right.
it to me,
Right.
because I'm getting more context. I'm getting more, and again, I can
Yeah.
like a text message, I can read it at my leisure, right? I can consume it at my leisure. I can go back to it. I can refer to it. But it is this video format that is just so much more engaging. And so, I think one of the other things that I've seen this year is embracing these newer tools in a way that allow you to just communicate better, instead of just, when I get nervous, I usually fall back on the things that I felt I was good at, right? So it's like, I'm just going to call people because I like to call people. Well, a lot of my employees are about half my age and they don't like to get phone calls. It freaks them out.
Right.
But I could still kind of accomplish the same thing by sending a short video to them instead. I get to kind of emote the way that I feel like I need to. They get the ability to consume it on their own time. In again, back to your point, Tim, about finding ways to use this media to enhance the safe space that you want to create with
Yeah.
folks. But that virtual safe space, I think, back to your point, it has to be very intentional, right? You have to be,
Yes.
you can't just say, well, you're safe, so
Yeah.
you're safe, it's a safe place. You can't just
Nope.
say that, right?
Nope. You got to live it. You got to demonstrate it. You got to walk the walk, and
Yeah.
everybody on the team needs to agree. You bring up a really interesting point, Kurt, about this idea of using a variety of different media.
Mm,
One of the things that that we've seen in during the pandemic is people working a lot more hours. There's some estimates. I think McKinsey believes that 2 to 3 extra hours a day is on average right now for the number of extra hours worked, and that's just a lot. Really, it's just an awful lot. So one of the things that we can do as leaders also is, instead of just having the same back-to-back meetings, Zoom, 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 one after the other, actually take time and have your team take time to give them a half hour just to prepare for the meeting. Just
Hmm.
give them, just block out a half an hour and say, this is going to be meeting prep time. We're going to actually just think about what it is that we want to accomplish individually, not collectively, but individually. What are the expectations you have? What is it that you want to bring to this meeting, that you want to get out of it, rather than, so oftentimes it's just rushing from,
Yep.
and your meeting prep is in a year ago was walking down the hall into the meeting room. Okay, so now what do I need to do? We need to be more intentional about that as well. And
Mm.
time can be one of the greatest gifts that we give each other when it comes to leadership, is to insist on taking time to get ready, or taking time to digest. We're gonna finish this meeting 15 minutes early, and take this next 15 minutes you've got blocked out on your calendar, just to give some consideration to how things are going for you, or for what you heard. And again, intentionality and time, I think, can really go together.
Yeah, I think that's really important. What you just said is there. People are taking. I used to say this about when I was managing leaders in organizations, by letting people know that people pick up on visual cues from their leaders. Like when I get up to go to lunch, people notice, or when I go into a morning meeting, or people pick up on those visual cues in the office and sort of pick up on what's okay and what isn't okay. And now that we're in this
Mhm.
sort of virtual world, to your point exactly, I have to be much more deliberate in saying,
Yep.
well, I know I need 15 minutes to get lunch ready. So I'm sure you do too. So we're going to cut this meeting short and do this thing. Um,
Yeah.
oh, I know you have to pick up your kids at a certain time. I remember when I had to pick up my kids, I needed at least a half an hour to get mentally prepared for that. So, but
Right.
we're going to cut this meeting short and whatever. So, to your point,
Right.
not just sitting there, living in your own embodiment of your things you're trying to get across, but trying to sort of be in their shoes a bit, and understand the challenges that they're going, and then acknowledging that you understand where they're at, and
Yeah.
then doing something to either ease it, or or at least acknowledge it. Acknowledging it is more than half the battle. Sometimes it's just saying, well, I know it's really bad that we put these 2 hour long meetings right next to each other. Don't worry, we're going to clear your day off half day tomorrow
Yeah.
or something, right?
Yeah. Brad Shuck, who is a professor at the University of Louisville, said it really, really well in one of our, as a podcast guest a couple months ago. He said our legacy as leaders will exist in how we treat each other today. So we are going to be judged. The future is going to judge us by how we treat our
Yep.
employees and how we treat each other right now. So this is really, really an important time for leaders.
It really is, because people forget jobs, they forget projects, but they never forget their bosses. You never,
For better or for worse,
yeah,
right?
right, exactly, right. And I could say, I
Yeah.
think I've learned a lot from the bad leaders I had, but
Yeah.
what not to do and such like that. But it is, people will remember the impact you had on their jobs and their careers, and
Yeah.
so you want that to try and be as positive as possible, because you have to think about people not in their jobs, but you're part of their career, you're part of their longer
That's right.
trajectory, right? And they might be with you for a year, 2 years, they might be with you for 10, 15 years. It's you should still treat everybody the same, as if they're going to be with you till the place closes down, or the rapture happens, or something. I don't know. Like,
Well, now is the time to double down on really making the employee experience a meaningful one, because if we're going to have, if we as business owners or leaders are going to have any chance of retaining employees, now is the time to really make that commitment to having a wonderful, really memorable in a positive way employee experience, so that people want to stick around. Especially, what gig economy is, what, almost 50% of all employees are within a couple of years are going to be, contract workers.
Yep.
How are you going to attract the best and the brightest if you're not really investing in your employee experience? And again, I just go back to creating a space that is psychologically safe, to help asking the whole team to engage in developing a charter, building very human-centered processes, and then just creating a clear path forward for everybody.
Yep.
It's just going to be more successful.
Yeah, to your point exactly, because I've seen it, especially this year with the remote, is that the recruiting has just become more intense, and it is to that point they're selling not money and a job and a title as much as they're selling the company culture, the experience you're going to have. And I find those people are the people that are being more and more successful, because they're pushing sort of the place you're sort of going to swim in versus kind of the destination, right? Which is more money, bigger title, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
right? But it's going to be the impact you can have in the organization. It's going to be the camaraderie and the friendships you
Right.
build, and the
Right.
knowledge that you gain over time, and the commitment that the company has to that. And the people that I see speaking more to that than they are just to, like, well, I can pay you 30% more because we're
Right.
Amazon or Target, makes a big difference.
It does. We have to play to the more emotional side,
Yeah.
because again, getting back to, emotions really matter a tremendous amount. And one of the big challenges that we have, as leaders, is believing that we're going to put our rational hats on, and we're going to think through a problem, and we're going to come up with a rational idea as to how to solve that problem, and then we're going to apply this rational thinking to all these people who are going to respond rationally. Okay, so the emphasis is on, we're just not that rational,
You should
right?
see my rational hat. It's got a lot of holes. There's strings coming out. It's a mess. It looks terrible. Like
Right.
it was a bad idea to ever have a rational hat. Well, anyways, but yeah, you think like, okay, I've got everything covered. I've checked all the boxes. Now I will present this thing. Everybody will consume it. Yum, yum, yum. And they will go off and be successful. And,
Well, yeah. Well, in what world? Only that only exists in our mind as we're creating it. What
right.
happens in the real world is that we respond to emails emotionally. That when the boss says, "Hey, after this meeting, I want to talk to you."
Yeah.
Holy Hannah, is that
Oh
a
no, I've
freak
had to
out?
I had to talk to so many leaders about this. Like, don't put a meeting on somebody's calendar at 4 o'clock on a Friday that says chat, right?
Exactly. And then multiply that times 100. And if you just use an emotional lens for every email that you send, just proofread every email through an
Yep.
emotional lens, go, how might someone feel about reading this?
Yeah.
How might someone feel? And
Yep.
that's a really important thing, because then you can reduce the anxiety level of your employees by 50%.
Yeah, because they're living in anxiety, right? We're living in a
We all are.
in not just our house, but our house is a restaurant and a barber shop now, and all these things. And then you
A
send me a text
school.
message
Yeah.
that says we need to talk later today. Like, I would have jumped through the phone and strangle you. What do you mean? No, don't call me right now. Like, whatever it is, I don't care. Don't put that in my head. You know.
That's right.
But one thing I would say is that if somebody does send you a thing that says we need to talk later today, respond back with, "I'm glad you brought it up first."
Oh,
Put it back in them.
that's a good one. I'll have to take that to my next client.
Just
That's
play
good.
tennis right back with that ambiguous
That's
crap.
right.
um,
Yeah.
okay, so Tim, one last thing I wanted to ask you about is, as you mentioned, where it seems that we're going to see more and more, even with miraculous vaccines and all these things, that we're going to be in this sort of
Mhm.
work from home state for the foreseeable future. As the next year comes about and we see people being more, maybe being more part-time in offices and things like that. What's your advice for people that maybe are are considering, being that virtual leader and staying that virtual leader? And what are some of the things that you see in the future that are going to be even more important than what we're seeing now? Is it that emotional intelligence? Is it that doubling down on making sure that you are really understanding the anxiety and emotional state of your employees while still being able to do your job? What advice would you give those leaders as the months progress here?
It comes back to what we've already talked about with intentionality,
Yeah,
adaptivity, this willingness to continue to adapt our processes for the changing environment. This isn't like goal setting. Used to be for strategic organizations, used to be like setting a very specific goal, like a mountaintop. I'm going to
yeah,
climb this
BHAG,
mountain.
right?
I can,
Big,
yeah,
hairy,
like a
audacious goal.
Absolutely. And
Hmm.
and most of the time those goals were visible. The mountaintop that you wanted to summit was visible. You could kind of chart your path
Yep.
to get there. Today, it's more like we're it's more like we're on a ship and we think that there's an island out there, but we're not sure if it's a mirage or if it's really an island. And
Right.
and if it is, it might be changing. And then the winds keep changing as we're getting there. So there's no reason to, from my perspective, in the development of where you're headed and how you're leading and how you're managing, is to have super big, monstrous, and tightly woven long-term goals. These BHAGs can be broad and general, but
Right.
how you navigate is going to come down to the short term and dealing with, like a sea captain might, where are the prevailing winds? How are we dealing with them? I think that's going to be the most important thing. And then building, there's all kinds of good work. Tim Clark, Amy Edmondson have
Mm,
done a lot of work on psychological safety. They're fantastic. They have lots of tools. Build a culture that is psychologically safe. That's absolutely foundational. And then get the team together to create a charter for what that North Star should be like in the short term. How is it that the team wants to get their business done?
right.
What are the processes that they want to use, and what do they see just in the next 30 days or the next 60 days? Or have a 90-day plan that you review in 45 days because it's going to change.
Yeah.
So I think short-term thinking is going to become more important on an execution basis,
Yeah.
in the near term.
No, I totally agree. I found that this year myself in a change because, a year or two ago, I was able to confidently go out and be like, 5 years from now, this is where we want to be
Right.
at. And to your point, I could chart a course right to it. I could, set all the milestones, all those things. This year, that's all exploded. And it's been much more of like, in 3 months, I want to be here. And then going back to exactly what you said, bringing that back to the team and saying, how can we achieve this together? Do you agree on that vision? And if you do, what are the things that you can do to help us get there? What special skills or new skills do you want to learn and adapt to helping us get there? And then when we get there, let's go back and look at it and see, how did we all do? And so I love that you're saying that, Tim, because that's been exactly my experience this year, and I see it's going to continue that way for a while.
It is,
Yep.
and how great is that? Let's
Yeah.
just live in what we got.
Right.
We don't have to live in a
Right.
dreamland. Let's just live in the world that we've got.
Live in the moment, right? Be
That's
present.
all. That's all we've got.
Yep, that's right. Okay, Tim. So if I want to know more about the work you do and the podcast, like, where are great places to go? I will put links in the show notes here. But Tim, if you want to let everybody know a great way to reach out to you or just to consume more, because if you're not subscribed to the Behavioral Gurus podcast, how dare you? Go and do it right now. Well, not right now because we're still doing the live show, but right after this, go and subscribe. Tim, how can I find out more?
You can follow me on Twitter at T Houlihan. The website is for my consultancy is BehaviorAlchemy. .com, and then the podcast is Behavioral Grooves. Grooves as in like grooves in your mind for behaviors, as well as grooves in the record. In an old LP, we talk about music almost every single interview. So if that turns you on.
Yeah, no, it's great. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for the work you do, Tim. And thank you so much for joining me today. You've got to come back on the show. I just enjoy our conversations too much not to have you on more regularly. So I appreciate you and the work you're doing.
It's always fun, and the pleasure is always mine. I always feel like I walk away from our conversation feeling better about everything, Kurt. So thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. All right, we'll talk soon.
Okay.
All right, everyone. So thanks for joining us today. If you haven't subscribed, you should do that thing. And please hit the like button because it's really important for the YouTubes and the things. More shows, more live shows coming up. And I hope you really enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you did, like I mentioned, subscribe, check it out. We're going to have lots more shows coming up. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day today to watch the show, and we'll see you next time.